Hello friends, we are covering chapter 4 which is titled as Learning for Self-Management and Improvement. Why are we having this module on learning in OB? Learning is a process by which we acquire skills, we acquire knowledge, we acquire various things which seem to be outside us. So why do we have to cover learning? Learning is required for managing oneself. Why do you do your studies? Why are you doing your post-graduation now? Because you want to improve yourself and you want to manage yourself, right? So every learning has got some self-management and improvement in it. Why do we need to self-improve and do self-management? The purpose of doing that is to grow and adapt to the changes of the future. If I want to grow, if I want to adapt to the changes, and if I want to become comfortable with the changes of the future, then I need to know, I have to learn. Now learning is happening all the time. Learning is happening all the time with all of us. Only thing is that some of us are not aware that we are learning and some of us are aware that we are learning. Some of us are willing learners and some of us are unwilling learners. But whether you like it or not, whether you want it or not, learning is an imperative. It's a compulsion. You have to learn things in life. Sometimes you learn it the hard way and sometimes you learn it the easy way. But when you become a part of the active learning, it becomes easier for you to change your behavior. So, we are covering learning chapter to understand how behaviors happen. When I learn, my behavior is said to be changing, is supposed to change. So, learning acquires more information, more knowledge about something, and that knowledge is supposed to convert my behavior into a new behavior. Hence, we need to understand how the learning dynamics takes place. That's the reason why we are learning as a chapter in OB. The objectives of this chapter would be to understand the importance of learning and an overview of the different learning processes. We'll give a picture about how learning takes place, how the body and the mind get aligned, and we'll talk about some models. The structure of the whole flow will be as follows. We have the introduction as usual. Learning, why is learning important? Learning theories, behavioristic theories, modeling process, some aspects of learning, the learning cycle, the learning process and overview, the learning environment, the mechanics of learning, and finally the summary as usual. Introduction. To predict and explain behavior of people in an organization, we must know how people learn. Learning and behavior are interrelated. You know, we hear people telling us, you look like a learned man, see the way you're behaving. Haven't we heard this expression? It is expected that a person who learned is supposed to behave differently, right? The environment keeps changing, so do institutions like business firms, schools, colleges, churches and clubs. If these institutions have to survive, they must learn new ways of doing work, acquire newer skills and knowledge that will keep them learning and growing. It's very important that to understand that change is a constant. Changes keep taking place. Now, take my generation. We were not exposed to computers and we did not start off our careers with computers and electronic based working. Now, some of my friends from my generation were not willing to learn computers and they came out of jobs. They were not willing to keep pace with the changing business environment. Some of us have kept pace, so we are where we are right now. And this is not enough. We need to continue learning till we adapt ourselves to the changing environment. It's very essential. Definition of learning. It involves acquisition of knowledge and skills through study, practice and or experience. More important for me is skills. In OB, we are talking about skills building. Skills are nothing but doable actions. Skills are an outcome of an information or a knowledge on which we take action. I have read about swimming on the Google. I have read the A to Z of swimming. Will I be able to be a swimmer? No. I need to actually go to the swimming pool, be there into the swimming pool. I need to put myself into the water. I may not learn swimming in the initial stage, but through repeated actions, I learn swimming. So in other words, skills are nothing but experiential. Skills are experiential. Today we want experiential. And hence we talk about not gyan, not knowledge. We want experiential output. So when you go to the organization for an interview, you are determined by the skills that you have to offer. What is it that you can do? Not it is about what is it that you know. What is it that you can do about what is it that you know? That is giving the skills to you. So when we are talking about learning in the OBE chapter, we are talking about the skills development. A quick learner and a willing learner is in a position to develop skills faster, as against a passive learner and a slow learner who will develop skills very slowly. So people who develop skills faster are always available for better changes to be adapted to. Okay? Learning usually leads to a permanent change in the behavior of a person. For example, a person who learns to read and write usually continues to read and write. We all are doing it. Similarly, a child who learns to cross the road does cross the road in the future as well. These are skills. Once you learn skills, skills remain in you. The skills may remain dormant. It may be sleeping today, but when you go back again and revisit the skills come back to you alive. If you have learnt swimming or cycling when you were about, say, 9 or 10 years old, and today if you are at the age of 25 and you have still not done any cycling or swimming in the last so many years, all you need to do is to go back to the cycling, and within a few minutes you'll be back into the track. Okay? Learning, most behaviors are learned behaviors. Most of the behaviors we know are learned behaviors. That means in every behavior there is a skill. Right? Learning has become an integral part of organization behavior. Hence we are studying this subject, this particular topic. In this chapter we discuss the following theories of learning. The behavioral theories, which involves classical conditioning theory and the operant theory of learning. Then we have cognitive theory of learning and the social learning theory. This forms the backbone of this chapter. To understand how we learn and how we grow. To understand under what circumstances people learn in which way. And the theories behind it that has come from a lot of experiments done by psychologists in the past. Right? So, at the core of any learning theory lies the concept of reinforcement or encouragement. You remember when you learned your arithmetic in school, your mother told you that when you do the tables, I'll give you a chocolate. So for the reward of the chocolate, what did you do? You did the sums very fast. You did it as quick as possible. For every correct answer, I'll give you one extra chocolate. So you did it more accurate. So what is mommy telling you? Mother tells you that for every action that is taking you towards your goal, I'm going to give you some reward. So that's a type of reinforcement. So I want to encourage behaviors in you which are adding you towards a goal achievement. At the same time, I want to discourage behaviors in you which are not taking you towards a goal. This is coming at a later part of the slide, which I'll be discussing later. Reinforcement could be either positive or negative and helps in the acquisition of application of newer learning. Taking it further, why is learning important? Learning is important because when an organization has large workforce, it has behaviors that are varied. When you have too many people in the company, there are too many different types of behaviors. And these behaviors are impacted by the rate at which people learn skills. Different behaviors have got different ways of looking at life. These behaviors could be behaviors which are adaptable, or they may be behaviors which are not adaptable. So when I am able to see the panorama of behaviors in my company, I am in a position to make out what sort of learning I need to give people so that they come with adapted behaviors. In organizations, we need people who have got behaviors which can be easily changed and adapted to newer circumstances. Right? Since learning makes an impact on all facets of behaviors in the organization, it is possible and desirable to mold behaviors of employees through the process of learning. If I want to change someone's behavior, all I need to do is to put that person on a learning process. It could be training and development, it could be some skills building, an outbound program, something that tells him that I need to change my behavior meaningfully. People don't change their behaviors unless there is a meaningfulness towards that, unless they find that there is some reward for them, unless they find it is worth it. So we have to create that wow effect, make people realize that it is worth it, and through that particular realization, people would be inclined to change their behavior with a meaningfulness. Okay? Taking it further, Learning theories help managers to understand and appreciate how behaviors and skills are acquired. And learning theory is usually imparted in the form of training and development and other forms of active interpersonal engagement, which I've already explained to you. Now, taking it further, we have got what is called as a behavioristic theories. Behavioristic theories based on behaviors. Learning and behavior are interrelated. These theories are addressing the fact that when the learning takes place, behaviors change. Okay? So the oldest theory of learning originated from the behavioristic school of thought in psychology, which focused on behaviors as the indicators of learning. If you are displaying a change behavior, then I understand or I conclude or I infer that you have learnt. So learning is seen in the form of a behavior which is observed. Learning is something that you do abstract, but if you have learned, it shows in the form of a action called a behavior. It's seen in the behavior. Learning principle like reward system and behavioral management approach are derived forms of behavioristic theories. Okay. Now these two we'll be explaining now. Well-known behaviorists like Ivan Pavlov, J.B. Watson, B.F. Skinner have contributed to the learning theory significantly. Taking it further, the first behavioristic theory we are covering right now, it is known as a classical conditioning theory of learning. Classical conditioning theory of learning. Those students who are listening to me who are psychologists will know this theory pretty well. I am just repeating it here. A Russian psychologist by name Ivan Pavlov conducted experiments on dogs to demonstrate the process of response stimulus learning. This has to be underlined. It is also called as response stimulus learning. Okay. Now the response is coming as a cause of the stimulus. So actually we need to call it a stimulus response learning. It should be called as a stimulus response learning, right? The stimulus comes first because as a result of it there's a response. The experiment demonstrated how an unconditional stimulus, like a piece of meat, created an unconditional response, that is of salivation in the dog. I'll explain this to you before we go further. Ivan Pavlov took a piece of meat and kept it in front of a dog. When you keep a meat in front of a dog, what does the dog do? The dog starts salivating. Now when you remove the piece of meat, the salivation stops. Now this experiment he conducted as a first stage, and in the first stage it confirmed the fact that the cause of the salivation of the dog was the meat. The meat became the cause and the salivation was the effect. So unconditional stimulus, the meat, created an unconditional response of salivation, right? Further, he introduced a neutral stimulus like a bell along with the unconditional stimulus. It was proved that the unconditional response became a conditioned response. So explaining it further, friends, in the second stage of the experiment, the meat was kept, and along with the meat, a bell was rung. The meat and the bell was at the same time. The bell was rung at the same time and the meat was kept. And the dog started salivating. This continued for some time. After some time, the dog associated the bell and the meat as one system. By the process of association, the meat and the bell was seen and perceived as one system by the dog. Now guess what happened in the third stage? In the third stage, the meat was removed and only the bell rang. In the third stage, only the meat was kept, the meat was removed and only the bell rang. And you would all be guessing what happened to the dog. The dog salivated. What was the original cause of the salivation? The meat. Now what is the cause of salivation? The bell. The bell got associated with the meat, and hence the dog could not distinguish whether the meat was there and the bell was there or both were there. It knew that if one of the elements is there, its salivation took place. It is an automatic response created by its own instinct. Okay? Now, it appeared as if the neutral stimulus, the bell is called as a neutral stimulus, it created a response even when the unconditional stimulus was removed. So, that theory which I spoke about right now is called as a stimulus response theory, also called as a classical conditioning theory of learning. The first experiment, as children, as infants, we learn that as learning for our survival. Instinct makes us survive. Instinct is not thinking. There are two things in all of us, two energies. One is the instinct with which we are born, which helps us to live and survive and preserve our comfort zones. It is spontaneous. Whenever you go through a discomfort, instinct comes to help you out. On the other hand, as social animals, we have what is called as a rational thinking process. So when we are children, rational is minimum, instinct is more. When we start learning, then rational comes. When the rational comes, our learning theories become developed. So the second theory of learning is operant conditioning or reinforcement theory of learning. The operant theory has been the work of B.F. Skinner, who used an apparatus called Skinner box and performed an experiment on rats. A hungry rat was made to sniff and move around within the Skinner box seeking food. A pellet of food attached to the liver was released when the liver was pressed. Accidental pressing of the liver by the rat released the pellet of the food, and the rat soon learned to associate the action of the pressing of the liver to the pellet of the food being released. There was a rat which went through a very long path in a box called a Skinner box, devised by Mr. B.F. Skinner. At the end of the box, there was a small liver. A piece of food was kept there. The liver was pressed from outside and the food fell into the box, and the rat ate it. It got associated with the fact that pressing of the liver will give the food. Now, it so happened that while the rat was going through, the rat soon learned to associate the action of the pressing of the liver to the pellet of the food being released. In the case of the dog, in the earlier experiment, it was coming instinctively. In this case, the rat associated this on its own. Now, what did it do? It accidentally pressed the lever of the apparatus. Now, every time it comes, somebody presses it from outside and the food falls. But this time what happened was, by accident, it pressed the lever. When it pressed the lever, what happened? The food fell. When the food fell, suddenly a new learning came to the rat. The rat said, wow, all I need to do is to press the lever, I'll get food. Now this learning happened by accident. Hence it is called as trial and error learning, accidental learning. Now when we grow up from children into slightly older children, we start learning things by accidental learning, by trial and error. When we are not sure about ourselves, we do something. And when we do something, some results come. When the results come, we say, wow, so we keep doing that again and again. But when we keep doing that again and again, do the results always come the same way? They don't. So what we do is we do trial and error, jugaad. Now this trial and error brings about this type of a theory called operant learning theory, also called as a trial and error learning. And operant conditioning focuses on voluntary or learned behavior as opposed to reflexive or unconditioned behavior. It's a behavior that is coming from thinking. You start thinking around you and then you say, let me do this and try it out. Let me do this and try it out. On that basis we learn. Now we come to the second theory, which is cognitive theory. Now it's very interesting theory. This is a theory which we use when we grow up and we run our lives. 80% of our lives is run through cognitive theory. Our basic setting of learning takes place in the first 1A and 1B. That is classical conditioning and operant theory. That becomes the basis of our life initially. But when we are living our life, that is a time when we are using cognitive quite a lot. Edward Tolman, first I'll read this, then I'll explain the theory to you. Edward Tolman, a pioneering theorist in the field of cognitive psychology, stated that cognitive learning consists of a relationship between cognitive environmental cues and expectations. Okay, now let me explain. There is an environment around us and there are many things placed in the environment. Each of the things placed in the environment has got its own identity. And these things are not related with each other at all. To give you an example, right now I am in front of the camera, I am talking to you. In this room, there are chairs, there are tables, there are two gentlemen who are standing there to help me out in this. There are also some books on the table. Now, none of these things are related with each other. But when I come into the room, my brain starts correlating things together. And it creates a mental map of meaningfulness. So I see tables, I see chairs, my mind correlates these two things. I also see these two gentlemen, I correlate with the two gentlemen. I see the camera into which I am looking right now, I correlate that too. I have the books next to me, I correlate with the books. So all these things become one single system It's a mental map I create. And these mental map, all the different elements, I make my own connections. Mind you, I make my own connections. And after making connections, what do? I give it a meaning. I give it a meaning X. Somebody else comes in, he sees the same elements. He connects it and gives a meaning Y. This is the broad foundation of cognitive thinking. It's nothing but creating mental maps of meaningfulness based on cues, hints. There is a bottle of water, there's a duster, so there's a classroom. That's a hint that's given to me. It may not be a classroom, but I interpret it because I've already seen it before. So cognition is a term I use when I create a mental map of meaningfulness for the first time. When I come again to the room, I've already made a cognitive map, there's a memory. So that memory triggers, when I see this, something familiar I observe and I recognize. Recognition comes when I cognize again. Recognition. Right? Now, Edward Tolman conducted controlled experiments on white rats who were made to run through a maze in search of food. And when it went, similar to what was happening in Skinner box, right? When the rats came across food, they began to associate the presence of food with certain cognitive cues. Cognitive means they saw a mental map of meaningfulness. And as a result, learning took place. They learned that when we go to these type of a background, this type of a circumstances, food is supposed to be coming. Imagine you keep a cup of milk, a dish of milk, and you're keeping it in a place where cats are coming. The cats start seeing that bowl and the milk. The first day it comes and takes the milk. Second day you keep the bowl, the cat will come and it will search for the milk. The cat has already made a cognitive map of that particular setting. Right? The presence of the bowl does not guarantee milk, but the cat has already made its own cognitive map saying that if the bowl is there, there should be milk, so I'll come for milk. Right? Now we use it a lot in our day-to-day life. If I have to go to, say, Sachin's house, and let us assume for the timing Sachin is staying at, say, Parel. I am at Matunga. To go to Sachin's house, I'll ask Sachin for instructions. Sachin will say, sir, you come by the bus, get off at Parel, and from Parel when you get off, you walk across the road. In front of there, you'll find one Vodafone shop, and from the Vodafone shop, when you take a left turn, there is a small a retail outlet named so-and-so, and then when you turn to the right, you come to the particular location, the building where I'm staying. What has he done? He gave me directions, and these directions got into my head in the form of a map. Now, do you find this to be much more powerful to recall how to go to Sachin's place or the postal address given in a written piece of paper? Definitely the cognitive map which Sachin gave me as instructions is much more better for me to reach Sachin's home because my map is already there. So what I do, I take a bus from Matunga, I go to Parel, I get off at the place and simply follow the instructions which Sachin told me because my map starts getting enlivened and then I reach him. Now 2 years down the line, I have not visited Sachin, I have not visited Parel. I come back and again one fine morning Sachin calls me, sir, how about coming to my place? It's my birthday. So what I do, I take a bus, I get off at Parel, I get off and I've crossed the road. That particular landmarks which Sachin told me are no more there. And I wonder how come, have I come to the wrong place? Now what has happened in the 2 years? I have not gone there. The elements of the place have changed. So when I go there after 2 years, I need to reset my cognitive map with the new elements. I need to reset my cognitive map with the new elements. So I have to go there and today mobiles are available. So I call mobile, I'll call up Sachin. He says, don't worry sir, I'll come and pick you up. And he picks me up. So after 2 years, I know the new cognitive map. Now if I keep going to Sachin's place frequently, then the cognitive map is into my mind. Even if there are changes happening, I'll know that yes, I need to adapt to the change. Okay? Now, similar thing happens at home. Ladies are known to change the furniture very frequently. So you're used to certain type of a layout. You come from the office, you open the door, And when you're sitting, when there's a seat, there's a sofa there, or some seat there, and you sit on that and you remove your shoes. This is a practice which you go through. It becomes habitual because the cognitive map is there in your mind. It's already taken for granted. On a particular day, you come there and you sit there, and suddenly you find you're sitting on the dustbin. What has happened? Your wife or your mother has changed the whole layout. The cognitive map has changed, and it takes time. And then first thing that comes is irritation. And then you find that the city is not to your left, it's to your right. So it will take quite a while for you to get adapted to the new changes. In corporate applications, friends, same thing happens in the office layout. It happens in the type of jobs that you're holding, in the types of profiles that keep changing. You're used to doing some profiles often. You have a routine with a profile. If you're a sales executive, you have a certain routine with which you do things. A new routine comes to you. A new profile is given to you. New routine has to come. So the cognitive map of yours has to reset. Today, in global working, in the type of fast moving businesses we have, our cognitive maps are put to daily challenge. When they put to daily challenge, what do we need to do? We need to keep on resetting the cognitive maps. Unlearning and relearning, as you call it. Okay? Very powerful way of learning, cognitive learning. Okay? In cognitive learning, one learns where different parts of the environment are in relation with one another. I've explained this through examples. Tolman thus considered learning as developing a pattern of behavior from bits of knowledge and cognition of the environment. This learning of the association between cue, hint, and expectation is termed as stimulus learning. A stimulus is given to me, and that stimulus becomes a stimulus for me to relate with the environment. Okay? Now we come to social learning. Very easy to understand. Social learning is a blend of both behavioristic and cognitive concepts. I go to a restaurant, a Japanese restaurant, wherein people are eating with chopsticks. I do not know how to eat with chopsticks. So I see a gentleman eating with chopsticks. I see his behavior, behavioristic part of it. Then I cognize the whole environment. This is a Japanese restaurant. So here the ambience, everything is Japanese. So let me learn how to adapt to it. So what I do is I take a couple of chopsticks and I start imitating the person and eating. And when I do that, what am I doing? I'm learning through social learning. I look at him and I learn. There are many skills we learn by looking at others. The first time when you went to do a dance, you had never danced before. So when you went there, the cognitive area was a dance room, the discotheque, wherever you went. And then you looked at somebody doing some sort of a moon dance or flash dance, some dance he was doing. You looked at him and you started to dance. And by looking at him slowly you learnt, or you made an attempt to learn. So when you look at others and learn, that's called as a social learning. At the same time, it is more of a behavioral theory since it depends heavily on the concepts of classical and operant conditioning theories. If I want to learn social learning happens more effectively when my classical learning and operant learning are pretty strong. Which means at the primordial level, when I'm growing up, in those years, if I have really learnt through classical learning and operant learning, my foundation becomes strong. Such a person is able to be a good cognitive learner as well as a learner in social settings also. Okay? There are people, when they are into social learning, they are very fast in learning things. If you actually look back at them, they are the people at childhood, they used to be good learners. So good learners at the primary level become good learners at the secondary level also. Okay? It states that there is more learning than just stimulus and consequences, and social learning theory assumes that learning can also take place through modeling process and self-control process. Modeling means what? I have a role model, somebody whom I like to emulate, some trainer whom I like to emulate. And I look at him and I look at his behavior and I look at the meaningfulness of his behavior and what he does. So I start modeling him. I start taking him as my role model and I start doing things without my own knowledge about things which he does. The words he uses, the body language he emulates, all those things I start doing. Right? Now that is what is called as a modeling process. Now we come to that positive reinforcement which I spoke about some time back, and the negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is said to take place in behavior when the employee is encouraged to repeat behaviors that work towards the goal. Positive reinforcement is usually done through praises and rewards, and hence it is also known as reinforcement by rewards. Right? When I want you to do something, I can make you do something by offering you a reward. If you do these things, I'll give you this. So because the reward is attractive to you, you will say, my God, I need it, so let me do it. So that will encourage you to do it. By doing that, what am I doing? I'm encouraging you so that your behavior starts getting reinforced. Now, this is reinforcement. This works in certain scenarios. In certain other scenarios, this works. Negative reinforcement is just the opposite. If you don't do this thing, I will not give you this. And this which I want to give you is very dear to you. So what do you do? For the fear of losing something which you like to possess, you'll start doing things and you'll achieve it. A youngster studying in 10th standard, his father tells him, if you get 95%, I will give you a bike, a motorbike. Now motorbike is a great thing, a thriller for a youngster. He said, no, so he'll work very hard to get the motorbike and he'll get 96%. Now when he goes to 12th, his father again tells him that if you work very hard and get into an engineering college or a medicine, whatever profession, right, I will give you a car, a nano. Now this boy might get motivated to get the nano, or there is a likelihood that he might slip down in his percentage. When he slips down in the percentage and he doesn't get into engineering or medicine, his father, will he give him a car? Will he give him a car? No. So he will not give a car, but something worse can happen. Whatever he has, that bike, because the father is angry with him, he may even withdraw the bike. Right? Now this is reinforcement of a behavior expected through withdrawal. Withdrawal is painful, whereas denial is not so painful. I promise to give you something, but I will not give you because you did not achieve results. You may not feel that much hurt. You will feel hurt. But if I take back something from you which you already have, you will feel more hurt. Promised promotion doesn't come in an organization because you did not perform. You get disappointed. But imagine you did not perform and they demoted you. That's dangerous and that's very tough. Fortunately, organizations have stopped demoting people. They make the person stay there instead of demoting him. Okay? Learning is effective. It's very effective. It's very, very long-standing when it goes through the following stages. There are 4 stages: acquiring the knowledge and understanding, some physical activity and a new behavior. So when there is an acquisition through means of knowledge, reading, doing it, discussing it, and changing a behavior, this is the first stage. Assimilating, it becomes a part of you when you keep on repeating it. Retaining it for a length of time for recall, repeat and reinforcement. Practice. Internalizing it, applying the assimilated knowledge, learning into internal meaningfulness and preparing to act upon it creatively. Initially I learned cycling, I got a knowledge of cycling. All that is required for cycling, I create the behavior, I do the physical activity of cycling, and then I assimilate it. I keep on cycling every day. Then when I keep on cycling every day, I start doing cycling in a manner in which my internal clock and internal system start aligning. I show my uniqueness when I do internalization. There may be 3 people cycling. Between me, A, B and C, when we go to internalization, our style will come out. We have seen sportsmen, right? Sportsmen acquire, they assimilate. But between sportsman A and sportsman B, in the same sports, you will find that one is showing one style, the other one is showing another style. Take Rahul Dravid and Tendulkar. Both of them, their internalization is seen by the style with which they do batting. Right? Then the last one is the most important capability. Capability is to learn more on one's own. You become capable. And when you're capable, when internalization takes place, you develop your style. When you develop your style, there's a lot of courage that you get. You're confident about yourself. So you may take inputs from others, but finally you will put your style and make things happen. And that becomes a position of capability, right? For learning to be effective, we need a few personal qualities. The quality of the personal involvement should be high. I must have a very high quality of personal involvement, willing to learn. I must be self-initiated, self-driven. It is all pervasiveness. I should be a learner for all times, at every place. People learn only few things and other things they don't learn. If I'm an all-life learner, all pervasive, everywhere it is pervading, then it becomes a better thing for me. Evaluation by the learner. I need to evaluate how well I've learned. Whether I've really gone in the right path, in the right direction. That is evaluation by the learner. Is it relevant to what I'm doing? Relevance. To broaden one's perception of the same thing and a person. What is important is, at the end of learning, my perception about life should be different. There are people who qualify through exams, academic exams. And they get qualifications. They get an MBA, they get a PhD. But the perspective about life is not broadened. They remain narrow. That is not learning. Learning is supposed to bring about a change in your perception, and you must be able to see things from different angles of different people. It's so important. Now we come to the very old learning cycle called the Kolb learning cycle. It's there in your book. The Kolb learning cycle suggested a cycle of experiential learning in adults in 4 stages. It's a cycle. You can start from any circle and end up with the last circle. First, I experience. I sit on the cycle and experience cycling. Then this experience gets processed in me, processing. Then it gets generalizing. And then finally, I start applying. It is similar to the 4 cycles which we talked about in the earlier slide. Almost similar, right? Now, this applying goes back to the new experiencing, new processing, new generalizing, and new reapplying. So this is a continuous process. Kolb learning cycle. These stages are repeated in a cyclical manner to gain effectiveness in learning. So this is also called as a learning loop. I keep on learning, I keep on doing it again and again, all the 4. When I do that, you know what happens? There's an expertise that comes into you, right? Now, a learning process, we are taking an overview. Now, there will be few slides in which we are talking about the different aspects of learning, right? Now, we say that learning becomes very, very involved, very, very pronounced when there are 4 factors that need to be contributed. One is the learning organization or the teaching organization, the school where you go, the college where you study. That becomes an important part of your learning. The culture of and the climate has to be created for a motivation to learn. So let us take our own institute, a very good culture. The organization is so very supportive for learning, right? The trainer himself, the teacher, the faculty. Now he or she creates an impact on your learning. It's not that they have to do it, but they facilitate the learning. The trainer or the teacher impacts and influences the effectiveness of learning through his or her behavior, values and competencies. So whatever, for example, I say, I have an influence over you, I may have an influence over you on what you should think. It's possible, it may not be possible. Okay? It depends upon the strength with which I put my influence on you, the background from where I come, and my intentions. Right? The third element is the learner himself, that is you, the person who's listening to me. You form the process systems and a function forms a process system whose function is the development and effective use of the other systems and processes. This learner uses the technology of learning which comes later, the institution which is Welingkar, the training system, and the trainer's inputs. There are 4 things. One is the trainer or the teacher, the organization, the learner, that is you, and finally the technology of learning. Right now it is a video learning, right? So these 4 come together and they become effective in this model of learning. Okay, friends? Now learning goes through 3 situations. When you're very young, you have what is called as a basic or primary learning. First time you're learning something. Very first time. So you have to learn the ABC. After learning ABC, you'll start forming words. After forming words, you'll start forming sentences. After sentences, you'll form meaningful paragraphs. Number of meaningful paragraphs will bring about a narration. Right? Now, similarly, in any learning process, there's a building block from alphabets to sentences, from alphabets to words, words to sentences, sentences to paragraphs, paragraphs to pages and chapters. Right? So we have basic learning or primary learning, secondary learning and applied learning or advanced learning. Depending upon where you are located, the need of the learner will be different. Right? Now I may have to use X type of methods when I'm teaching a fresher. I got the freshers, to teach them I need to have X type of methods. I need to adapt my methods differently when I'm having a slightly matured audience. Now when I do training for leadership training in big companies, I'm dealing with people at the level of AVP and VP levels. So there the type of training needs required by them is very different, advanced learning. Right? So what are the requirements? Some few points are given here. The rest of it is there in the book. You can read it. The learner has the knowledge of the subject and introductory course. That is a basic primary learning. He has some idea about what is what. Secondary learning will be some knowledge he has and he wants to expand his knowledge further and he wants to refresh it. Applied learning means he has much knowledge about the subject and he wants to get into the depth of research. So 3 different levels of learning, right? Now, a learning environment, we talk about learning environment and learning organization these days. If an environment has to be learning, there should be support from the culture. Culture means the company has got certain type of ambience, environment. They should support it. The climate should be non-threatening. When people are learning, they should not feel uncomfortable because learning is a change process. Learning is a change process. Change means what? I'm leaving one comfort zone and going to the second one. Now in the transition, we always have a fear. If the transition is non-threatening, in fact if it is supporting, then it becomes a very good environment for learning. And the third one is, as an individual, you need to have a challenge in your learning. What do you mean by challenge? The learning should have some thrill. Learning is an adventure. You go from one zone to another zone. So you must feel like going. There should be some sort of a positive pressure. There's no challenge, there's no learning. Right? The mechanics of learning. When the learning takes place, these are the few things which are very useful. Feedback is very good. Practice is important. And when you are given program instructions, it's given in a certain systematic manner, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. It also helps. And more importantly, face-to-face group. Face-to-face learning is very good. When you guys come for PCP, personal contact programs, that's a face-to-face learning. And many students have come and told me, sir, we learn the best when we are into PCP or face-to-face group. Right? The learning process involves 3 steps: discovery, experimentation, auto systems design. First time I'm discovering something new, wow. And then I start working with that. Imagine a Lego pieces are there, right? You give it to a child, it starts discovering something new. It looks wide-eyed, it looks like that in a very big eyes. And then what does it do? It experiments. And then it starts creating its own shapes, auto systems design. This is creative learning, right? Finally, we come to the summary, friends. We learnt learning theories that facilitate us to understand learning types. We also learnt positive and negative reinforcement of learning. Learning involves acquiring, assimilating and internalizing various inputs and making effective use of them. The Kolb learning cycle has 4 parts. We just learnt it. Experiencing, generalizing, conceptualizing and applying or experimenting. Straight from your book. There are 4 elements in a learning process or the teaching organization. The process, the trainer, the teacher, the learner and the technology of learning. We learnt of the 3 levels of learning, that is basic, primary learning, secondary learning and applied and advanced learning. That's it, friends. Thank you very much.